Ebony Staten has walked in the privilege of supporting and advocating for students from the start of her career. Unlike many before her, Miss Staten found herself in the higher education arena before being exposed to its possibility as a potential career path. During her early days as a college student on the campus of Cal State San Bernardino, her first supervisor gave her the opportunity to create and collaborate with other offices in the process of streamlining student transitions for the campus. It was that experience that has shaped her lens for involving students in the work of advocacy and the importance of partnership. Today, with over 13 years of experience in higher education and 3 years in education focused nonprofit work, she remains passionate about student success and support with a lens toward continuous improvement for both her own professional skills and the work for which she's responsible. Ms. Staten endeavors to continue working towards student centered solutions for the purpose of removing barriers and bolstering opportunities for all students through thoughtful collaboration and partnership development. This approach has allowed her to work with and lead student support teams on 2 university campuses, partner with the administration of multiple K through 12 school districts throughout Southern California, and today a worldwide nonprofit. Although Ms. Staten has acquired her master's in public administration at Cal State San Bernardino, today she works toward a second in psychological counseling with plans to commence summer 2022 from Cal Baptist University. In spite of all of her accomplishments, there is nothing she takes more pride in than her family. Her husband Patrick, daughter Naomi, and son Nathan are the driving force behind all that she does. Ebony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us, as Matt said, and we are delighted to have the opportunity to chat to you, and a really fascinating bio that we're going to delve into. And I suppose to allow our listeners to get the opportunity to know you a little bit better, can you talk to us, I suppose, about your career in higher ed, your pathway to where you are now?
Absolutely. I think for my story, I tend to lean more towards the the student who was lost. So, um, everyone else around me all knew exactly what they wanted to be when they grew up, right? In my case, I didn't have that one thing. And it wasn't until I was working at my first job on campus in the Office of Records, Registration, and Evaluations that I even received a taste of what that might look like. And with that experience, there was a welcome letter that students received after they were admitted to the university. And I asked my supervisor, B, and I texted her just a little while ago, but I asked her, how do students know what to do after they get this letter? And she's like, oh, they just register for classes. I said, yeah, but how do they know that? How do they know where to go, what to do, and how to do it? And she looked at the letter and she looked at the packet. And I think, Matt, I may have reached out to you to find out what that admission packet looked like. And with that, I was given the opportunity to let's look at ways to ensure that things are clear for students. It's that has been my process from day one, from working in registration to working as an advisor to working in student affairs. And even now, all of it has been focused in a lens towards how do we ensure that what we intend to do is actually being done, and making sure that it's very clear for students how to navigate that process.
Yeah, definitely. And, I just, we're talking beforehand, before we started recording, just like how parallel our, paths into getting into advising was, like you working in the office of registrar, me working admissions, working at the front counter to working in the back, you as an evaluator. Now they're called transfer graduation counselors, me as an admissions evaluator, and then into the same office in advising and academic services.
Mhm.
But flash forward to today, like you are now working at Career Village and you're the director of higher education and diversity initiatives. So tell us more about Career Village and your role as director and what that entails.
So, first, to understand my role, Career Village was designed to ensure that all students have a professional network of support, so that regardless of where you are, regardless of your your region, I'm going to say specifically region because we know that there are specific careers that are heavy in certain regions. Um, that you can go online and you can go to careervillage.org. And if you have a question about a career path, there is someone on the other end with experience in that career path who will answer your question. With that by itself, it rings true to all that I've been focused on this whole time. And so then with my role as director of diversity or higher education and diversity initiatives, the focus is to ensure that not only are students hearing from those professionals abroad, but also hearing from the local supports that they have access to. So I'm partnering with higher education institutions, mainly right now HSIs and HBCUs, in order to ensure that students can still see the connection of the resources that are available to them close by. And with the diversity initiatives, the reality is that our organization has served marginalized communities in large part. In I would say we are probably over 50% of our 5.5 million student users are students of color. And so with that, that is definitely a passion, that is a labor of love, and it is the opportunity for me to walk out what I see as a big part of who I am. So I love it.
Yeah, I think that you can hear the passion about it in your voice. And what's really interesting is that connection back to what you were talking about, your first job, and like the spark that came from, well, how do students know, and guiding and providing clarity. And maybe if we can
Yeah.
take you back then to working as an advisor at CSUSB, can you talk to me a little bit about, you had that first role in the welcome pack, but then you take a step into advising. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
So I would say I caught the advising bug, okay? And I say bug because it swallowed everything that, and all of my time, all of my attention. I was obsessed with ensuring that students had a streamlined process, that they were well cared for, and that advisors had advocates on campus, not just the students in that space, but like understand what advisors do, the gravity of our work. Um, and so it led me into several different conversations, several different spaces. It was through that I started. I remember at one point I looked at our campus calendar, and on the campus calendar it had advising week, and I started asking questions like, "So what do we do during advising week?" And well, it's on the calendar. We don't really do anything. We don't, do we? So it was at that point that I started talking to the folks in marketing. I started talking to each of the deans, the chairs, other advisors. Hey, let's really utilize this as an opportunity for us to not only highlight the work that we do, but the importance for students to know that we're here. We developed a whole big swath of programming around that. And I say we, yes, I may have started the bug, but there was no way that advising week could have been done without all of the advisors on campus. That was a ton of favors and will you please help me, and do you have things to donate? I mean, it really was a labor of love for all of us, but we just needed that extra little something. Um, there was also the peer advising. So I'll say that while the bug caught me with advising week, the peer advisor training happened by accident. Um, Kiana Wallace and I were asked to create the student success peer advisors, and we had like 3 months to design the program. And within that time, we said, well, we're going to need to put together the training. And so we put together the training, and then we decided that we would open the training up to advisors and the mentors, the mentor's office. And we did that a couple times. And then at the time, Dr. Morales then made it a requirement for all of the campus peer advisors and mentors. That was all by accident. That wasn't intentional. So there were some things that were the bug, and there were some other things that I kind of fell into. Um, but still a labor of love all the way.
Yeah, and let me backtrack a little bit just to give listeners an idea of Ebony. Like Ebony is talking about some of the initiatives that she was a part of, which is just a small amount of actually what she ended up doing. And hopefully we might have to have a part two to talk about all of this. But originally, when Ebony and I were working in our respective offices, we applied for the same advising position in advising academic services. And Ebony actually got it. I didn't. And when I found out I didn't get it, it was one of those like, oh darn. But when I found out who got it, it was, oh my God, that's like the best choice ever. Like Ebony's gonna do something with that. And luckily I got to another position open up the office and then I got it and then we ended up working together. But one of the things I remember from you, Ebony, was as you would stay super late a lot because you were trying to get everything done, but you still had time to kind of mentor me a little bit and be like, okay, what are you working on? Have you thought about this, this, and this? And I'm like, no, my gosh, never crossed my mind. Okay, let me start doing that. And it's just, how even though like it's a lot that you had to do and a lot on your plate, you still had time for everyone else and to kind of just like make sure it was like this team environment and everyone got everything done. But kind of going into that, you're a go-getter. You're very much like, if there's an issue, let's try to solve it. Or if there's, advising week shows up on the calendar, what is that? Let's figure it out. For you, was buy-in an issue at all with trying to get these initiatives to get off the ground or to make it its best self?
I'd say not even a little bit. And the reason why I say that is because I was blessed to work alongside folks who I had worked alongside already for years. There were the advisors in College of Natural Sciences, Social and Behavioral Sciences, Arts and Letters. These were folks similar to you and I who had been on the campus for some time, and I had already had the opportunity to cultivate meaningful relationships within those spaces. So when all of this work came about, there was okay, I'm going to ask a favor. I'm going to need your help. Can you? And there were definitely times when folks would say, Ebony, I'm doing this only because you're asking me. If anybody else were to ask, I'm not doing a thing. I'm like, okay, I got it, but it's me and you all the way out, right? Like, let's roll. So the buy-in was more so, I would say, for me, a very clear picture on the value of people, the value of partnership, the value of authenticity and relationship. Without those things, I wouldn't have been able to do all that I did in that space. All of the initiatives, I may have started the spark, but there were tons of hands in that pot.
And I suppose building on that a little bit, like I hear in the way Matt talks about you and the relationship, like how you connect with people and how you're willing to help people. And so I can understand why they were willing to buy in. But you have worked in a number of different organizations, a number of different roles, not everywhere where you've had maybe the time to build up. So I'm wondering, like, how do you approach it for listeners? I suppose, you are somebody who's a go-getter. You are somebody who makes things happen. For listeners who are wondering, like, how can they go about it? Is there something that you would offer to them, or about your particular approach, or how you go about if you're looking to make change?
100%. I still say it's valuing people. It is valuing the student experience. It's valuing your neighbor's experience, your colleagues' experience. And that, when I say the value of authenticity, when you authentically care about someone's well-being, then you will take the time out to say, you know what? We have a whole lot on this agenda, but can we just take a minute and check in? You good? Because I'm not. You gonna make it? Because I'm on a wing and a prayer right now. We gonna have to hold one another accountable. I strongly believe that there is absolutely no way that any one person can do anything on their own well. Yes, you can 100% start that process. You can start some conversations, you can start a project, but to do it well, you've got to have folks that you can lean on, and there's got to be folks who can lean on you. So the very first place I would say to start for any of us is to really check our motives, check our heart. Why are we there in the first place? And once you're very clear on your why, then you make it your responsibility in finding out other people's why. It's in that space that you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, I can help you with this, and I can see that you can help me with that. But it's always from a very authentic place of genuinely wanting to partner and connect.
All right. And so listeners aren't going to be able to see this, but I have my camera off right now. And the reason is, Ebony, I have a special guest here to see you.
Uh-oh.
They heard that you're being interviewed, and they said, can I chat with Ebony just for a little bit? It's someone that works in our office, someone that you know very well, someone that you help mentor. We mentioned this person before we started recording. Can you guess who it is?
Oh, John.
But hi, Ebony. How are you doing?
Hi. Hey, John, I'm great. How are you?
Good. I am doing great. When I heard about this podcast, I was like, I got to stop by and say hi. It's been a while.
Yes, it's so good to see you. Oh,
Nice to
wow.
see you too. I know. It's been a while.
So John, what was Ebony like as a supervisor for peer advising? Because you were a peer advisor for Ebony.
I was, yeah. I'd say just having Ebony as as our supervisor, it was a good experience to have because I mean so much experience with with the university, having a mentor as herself, um, and then I was just new to advising, so I didn't know like what to expect, and she coordinated this whole program for peer advisors. It just so happens, Ebony, that I was doing some cleanup the other day and I found the peer advising manual that you created, and I was looking through and I was like, oh my gosh, like there was so much in there that it's still, I mean, it's still helpful till today. So I mean, just under your direction has always been helpful, and I think that the peers can share the same feeling that I do too.
Aw, thanks.
Column. So John's talking about this training manual, this binder that Ebony made. Guess how many pages this training manual was?
A training manual for peer advising. Let's go. I feel like Ebony involved. It's probably reasonably sized. I'm gonna say 35-page manual.
Probably, yeah, but double sided. So there was probably like 70 or 80 in there.
I had to make sure you had all the resources.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. I told you, I
Oh,
definitely
gosh.
caught the advising bug. 100%.
Well, I still have it, so I might ask for your autograph. But it was nice seeing you. I want to make
Same
sure I'm mindful of our time.
here.
But thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hope you guys are doing well. All right.
Yeah, what a lovely surprise to watch. Listeners won't have seen, but like just to see Ebony's face when John was there, and earlier on when Matt came on. So clearly the relationship between the advisors at CSUSB is something special.
Definitely is.
100%.
Definitely agree.
Well, thank you, John.
You're going to make my eyeballs sweat.
This is when we were hoping that the video we could actually record, and then we could post that. But yeah, I mean, you've definitely had an impact on, various individuals. So me included, John, a lot of the other peers, other advisors on campus. But, kind of going back to you being a go-getter, and let's talk about technology, is you had something to do with, before they got bought out by EAB, bringing grades first. Can you talk about how that kind of came about?
Yes. So it started with really, remember back during that time, there was the phrase, we need you to do more with less. And so back then I created with Mauricio, I can't remember his last name, but his office was in the library. But he worked in distant learning, I think it was. And I went to him to ask if he could help put together basically a landing page to create our sign-in process. And it really was he and I putting together a series of hodgepodge systems to create a way for us to be able to track where are students coming from? Are they meeting with their advisor within their own college? Are they coming directly to us? And us being able to kind of track that and report that at the end of the year. Through those conversations, we finally got to the point where we really need to actually have a tool that does this as opposed to our finagling. And so it was at that time that I started researching tools. And with researching tools, I also invited those same advisors. Hey, y'all, I need everybody's eyes on this. I don't want to in any way assert any one program over another. So we had maybe 5 or 6 different companies come out, and advisors and chairs and deans from all over the campus were invited to come and listen in on their presentation. And it was grades first at the time that rose to everyone's liking. It was interesting that at the same time was when administration introduced EAB. And so it was an interesting dichotomy between both what was being advocated for and then also the needs from top down, because there's still legitimate needs, right? And finding a way for both of those to meet. I left before the implementation, but the goal of having grades first was in order to ensure that we could utilize the data from student engagement to help us to build on the programming that was already in place.
And I suppose we've talked about, you being a go-getter. We've talked about the way in which, you maybe look to approach projects and help others go about that. Just again, kind of building on that, because you have led a number of teams, just interested in kind of your approach to leadership. Is there a particular kind of somebody that really inspired you in relation to that, or is it different things you've taken? Can you just talk to me, I suppose, about how you approach leading teams?
Sure. So I won't sugarcoat it. I'll say the very first time I led a team, I fell flat on my face. And that was I wasn't on the campus of Cal State San Bernardino at that point. And it was in that role, I think the first thing that most new leaders fall into is the feeling like you have to prove yourself, feeling like you have to be a certain person as opposed to being your authentic self. I 100% fell into that. So I would say that my perspective on leadership now is, 1, don't do that again. But 2, it's going back to who I am. It really is being centered in that space before everything else. Yes, there are questions to ask, and that is typically the first place I go is, why do we do this? And are there opportunities in this space? I think with being on more than one campus and being in nonprofit work, it gave me the opportunity to see things through several lenses, but that doesn't shift the importance of people. That doesn't shift the importance of taking time out to separate yourself and recognize the reason why you're there in the first place. So leadership for me has largely been as a result of lessons learned from times I fell flat on my face. But also when you say, are there people that I look to now that inspire me? I would say 100%. I take little bits and pieces from people all over the place. They may never even know I exist, but I am 100% gleaning from those insights because they've traveled this path before me. And it would be completely pious and ignorant at the same time for me to assume that I could do it in and of myself. And then, of course, a whole lot of prayer. Let's just be real.
Perfectly said, and kind of reminds me of a quote from Darren LaCroix where he talks about when you make mistakes, or you can learn from everything, every experience, but if you make a mistake, fall forward,
Mm-hmm.
because then when you get up, you see that you still
Mm-hmm.
made progress.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we have advising higher ed conferences that are throughout the year, and Nakata has their annual
Mm-hmm.
conference, and hybrid one, if you will, that's coming up in October. But they have a virtual component, but we'll still have an in-person component. And conferences, give us opportunities to network, opportunities to learn from others, attend great presentations, and then, of course, is speaking to the choir. I know, but in our survey that we sent to listeners, 1% asked about, hey, a suggestion for a topic is, how do you prepare for a conference, or what do you do at a conference, or get the most out of a conference? And when I think of that question, I think of you, because when we both attended the 2014 annual conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, like, you were all over. Like, once you got there, you were so excited to get there, and I think made so many friends and connections in like an hour, than I did the whole conference. And you just seem to have all this energy throughout the whole time, which by the end I'm usually drained. So I guess, in 2014, if you want to think back to that point, what kind of things were going through your mind in terms of, how you got the most out of the conference, or tips that you can give to individuals? And I guess even how would that be different now for you?
Okay. So I would say the very first place back in 2014 that I started in my prep for Nakata, first, I was super stoked to go. So I was going to be a grown up, y'all. I was going on a work conference. Like that was a big deal. Um, then beyond that, I had several projects on my plate at the time. So, yes, there's the peer advisors, there's advising week, there was the 4 year graduation pledge, at risk advising, the campus wide peer advising training. All of these for me were different lenses to approach the conference through. I had the opportunity to either choose one. Which one lens do I want to focus on? Or are there multiple spaces in which I could uh, basically two birds with one stone kind of sessions, and that was in large part what I did. I went with the intention of improving upon my current processes. So that was my focus. Through the lens of all of my projects, how could I improve upon what I was already doing for all of them? Now, you asked, well, what might that look like now? So, 2 kids later, and 6 or 7 years down the line, and probably 15 pounds, I might pace myself a little more. Um, but I still think that I would take advantage of the face to face opportunities as much as I could because I enjoy the relationship building. At the same time, taking advantage of any of the online options that I can watch later on. So if I can schedule those at a later time and focus my time on that particular or on a single lens, then I would do that. Um, but my goal was always continuous improvement, looking for ways to make sure that not only was the process clear, but that I could prove it with data. I wanted to make it very clear that our students were being served well and that they were having the opportunity to develop um, and graduate before 6 years.
Yeah, I think that commitment to continuous improvement, you can hear that in everything you've been talking about, and even dispensing kind of time management advice there. And while you say you might pace yourself differently, you still remain committed to continuous improvement. I mean, you're taking on, you're currently studying for another master's, and in clinical psychology, I suppose. Just our listeners, I think, would be interested, I suppose, what inspired that, and how are you finding studying and working and juggling, being a parent, all of those things together?
So first, I'll say I'm going to tell just a quick story and then tie it in. I was involved in a project that allowed me the opportunity to check in with those who I had worked with before, to ask them what would be a lesson you would teach Ebony um, uh, down the line or as a result of your time together. It was Matt. Matt was one of the people that I reached out to for that project. And Matt's answer to me was that Ebony needs to be mindful of the fact that not everybody moves as quickly as she does, that she has to be patient with other processes that are currently in place. 100%. I am a uh, I'm not going to say I'm impatient. I'm going to say that I am working on my patience, but it is not something that I will ever pray about because I don't want the Lord to give me any more tests around patience. So instead, what I will say is I am working on it. As far as workload and navigating all of my lack of impatience or my lack of patience and feeling like everything needs to be done yesterday, I really couldn't say that I have a single answer as to how I've been able to juggle going to school full time, working full time, two small kids, and a whole husband. I don't have an answer, and half the time I'm praying, trying to figure it out. Like, okay, now what do I do? Because I got somebody who won't sleep through the night. I've got another person who needs her hair done, but that's going to take me a while. Like all of the things, right? Um, so I would say it's day by day. Like there is no secret sauce, but there are people that I do look to for inspiration. Like, okay, not a Pinterest mom. Let me start there. It's not a Pinterest mom. I'm not looking for the Pinterest moms because I am not at that level, okay? But I am looking at folks like Bozoma St. John. I'm looking at folks like Joanna Gaines. I'm looking at folks who have somehow figured out a way to manage their home life and their professional life with grace. But that's not a one answer kind of deal.
Take it, people say day by day, but in this case, like minute by minute.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
Now, one of the things you mentioned earlier was data, and when you were at Cal State San Bernardino, part of some of the initiatives that you're part of, like peer advising, was done through SSI, or the Student Success Initiative fees, which were fees that were student fees that were then allocated to other departments that you had to apply for. But then you also had to submit reports and prove that, hey, if I'm using this money, that I'm actually doing something with it, and it's the success of the students. Can you talk about the Student Success Initiative in the sense of like how you applied for it, but also how you measured that what you were doing was working, and that because you had to keep reapplying for to get money each year?
So with that, I remember bits and pieces. So I do remember with the peer advising. Peer advising was funded completely through the SSI funds. And with that, it was the process of how many students did the peer advisor see within one quarter. It was also the research or the data that needed to accompany the training, right? So pre and post tests. How much did students know before they embarked upon our training program? Now, the first time, I want to say we did 20 hours. And even then, folks were looking at me like, Ebony, you gonna have these kids in here? Yes, they got to learn all the things, all the things. And with that, it was pre and post tests, it was quizzes throughout, it was a cumulative exam, really looking to ensure that they not only understood the information, but they could apply the information. So that was for the training program. And then, of course, the numbers, how many people have gone through it, how many people have actually passed, because I wasn't passing everybody. I was holding the line there. The other one was for the actual meeting with students. It was numbered during the quarter. It was surveys from students and their experience with working with the student success peer advisors. That largely also informed what it looked like. Also, I want to say we did a survey or a comparison between the students' GPA and progression that went to see a peer advisor versus those who didn't. And each time that information came back with a glowing review or account of the program. So it's always one thing to say, yes, I love it and it's fun and we're doing all the things, but you've got to be able to ensure that you have something to point back to say that it's a success. Particularly, not, I wouldn't even say just dealing with money. I would say dealing with somebody else's life. Like, the reality of advising is that we're dealing with the lives and the futures of other people. And so you want to have that data to say, yes, I am moving in integrity in all that I'm doing to ensure that these students come out well on the other side.
Absolutely. And I think data becomes increasingly important in terms of decision makers and getting them on side on different projects. And one of the things that I suppose is interesting, Ebony, is that you've worked at higher ed institutions and you've worked for nonprofit organizations. Interested in, like, are there significant differences between the two sectors,
Mm.
And can you just talk a little bit around maybe that?
I honestly don't see huge differences. I think in any space you have the reality that some folks have been there for a really long time, and you have the reality of the folks who are there for a purpose. You have the reality of those who are there just for an intended short period of time. Both of those exist, or all of those exist in both places, right? I think that the heart is that each of those starts out with the notion of wanting to do well by the students. Both places you have that. Um, what I think is different is the speed at which it can happen. And I know y'all know this better than most, is that when you have a nonprofit and it's a smaller team of folks, and you realize you're looking at the data and something looks a little wonky, we need to make some changes. Those changes can be done within a week or less. You notice those same things on a higher institution's campus. Those changes don't always happen as quickly unless you're the coordinator and you can make those changes. So I think size being one. I would also say funding is also one that has been a challenge for both. For most nonprofits, we want to solve the world's problems. I'll fix all the things. Let's go, people. And you're surrounded by people who want to fix all the things. So I am in a space of all ebonies. And it's great because all of us are looking for ways to, hey, how can I help you? You want to help me? Yeah. And it's nonprofits left and right. Hey, I'll be your partner. Let's work this out. But when you're looking at the higher ed institution, you don't always see that. And I would say that it's easy to get to a place where, at least when I was in higher ed, it was easy to get to a place where you felt like there were times that it was an uphill battle. I haven't experienced that in the same way that I have in higher ed. I'm sure it's there. Let's just say that I'm sure it's there. And in both spaces, there will always be um, politics and all of that. All of that is still a thing. You can't run away from politics. It is in every corner. But I would definitely say the uphill battle feel is one that's different in the nonprofit world than in higher ed.
Yeah, it reminds me of Kenneth Blanchard's 1 Minute Manager book, where he essentially talks about there's like different types of employees depending on where they're at, like if they're new or seasoned, how knowledgeable they are, but how much energy that they have and how
Mm-hmm.
motivated they are. And you can be really motivated, but not have that knowledge base because you're starting out and
Mm-hmm.
you have to build that foundation. But you might have people that are super knowledgeable but aren't as motivated because they've been there for
Mm-hmm.
years and they're just like, I don't have the energy anymore. I don't want to try as hard or do these initiatives. And then you kind of have the ones that are in the
Mm-hmm.
middle that are have the knowledge and are highly
Mm-hmm.
motivated and want to make things happen, but maybe they can't because they're not the coordinator. They can't make the decision, which can lead to a lot of frustration as well.
100%.
Yeah.
Lots of frustration. I would say, even in my experience, I think what could always be done that I don't think we do well as people, just in general, is finding that balance between people. If you have a new person with tons of energy who wants to do all the things, and you are the person who has been there forever with all of the knowledge, that is the perfect Batman Robin scenario. But typically, we're not seeking those folks out. Instead, it's, I'll do it myself. And I fell victim to that also. The I'll do it all. Yes, I did reach out to other folks, but I still felt like I was carrying the weight that I didn't have to. So I would say, in large part, finding connections. Like, there's people, like, talk, have conversation, and we can find ways to work it out.
Absolutely. Quarterback needs a running back.
Yes. Yes.
And I think, Ebony, there are going to be loads of people listening to this who, love your energy, your enthusiasm, your knowledge, and will want to reach out to you to, for further, ideas or potential collaborations or partnerships.
Yeah.
Is there a better way that people can get in touch with you? Is it email, LinkedIn? What's the best way for people to reach out?
Sure. Folks can reach out to me through LinkedIn. Not a problem there. But also, I would say the email I'm paying most attention to right now is my work email. So if you wanted to send me an email, then that would be at ebony@careervillage.org. Ebony with a Y, EBONY. We don't do the IE, the double E. It's EBONY.
Well, I just want to thank you. This has been really interesting. I think we could continue this conversation for the same amount of time again, and we'd still have plenty to talk about. So hopefully we can have you back in the future. I wish you continued success in your career, and thanks very much for joining myself and Matt today.
Thank you both for having me. I've really enjoyed myself. Thank you.